Recording, start stream. Hello. Welcome to the Statecraft Series, Episode 2. Today, we'll be talking about the Alabama decision from a few weeks ago over IVF and frozen embryos. Delta will be here momentarily. He's getting off from special needs school. If you want to go ahead and start us off, McGuire.
All right. Tremendous. Yeah, so I suppose I never introduced myself last time, so I'm Colonel Doctor, not actually. Jonathan S. McGuire. Don't consult me for medical advice. It's technically illegal for me to offer that. But yeah, no. So I suppose the Alabama decision. I I think this was midway through February. The Alabama State Supreme Court heard a case from several different plaintiffs, a couple different families who had um, cryogenically frozen embryos that were fertilized outside of the uterus that were in storage at a hospital in Mobile, Alabama. Um, I don't know. Did you hear the story about how the embryos actually got damaged? That was the issue. The embryos were destroyed and they were suing because under Alabama state law they thought that this qualified as a loss of human life, so they were suing for wrongful death or something to that extent. Did,
Okay.
did you hear about how that actually came to be though?
No, I did not.
Apparently, the hospital. This is from the Alabama Supreme Court document. So that the hospital itself had these embryos stored in a unlocked room. Okay, cryogenically frozen. So I think in liquid nitrogen, very very cold temperatures. Right? You've seen like dry ice and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so somebody, another patient wandered in the room, picked up these frozen vials, okay, got severe burns on their hands because they're just that cold to the touch, dropped them and shattered the embryos essentially,
Jeez.
which is definitely a way to destroy a couple of families' children.
Yeah.
If if I'll be blunt about it, but
Yeah. The big question though is,
yeah, no, so
do they grant them personhood? That's the really big thing.
yep. So as it stands, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that they did
Yeah.
under Alabama state law. They held that the embryos are children. I guess the context to this is that there was a law in the books. I'm speaking off the top of my head here, but I think improper death of a minor, something like that, from the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act
Yeah.
from 1872. Um, so that law stipulated that a deceased child is considered wrongful death of a minor, and you can seek punitive damages for it. Um, but these families that lost these embryos, they sue for these punitive damages, and the hospital actually maintained that the act did not cover unborn children outside of the uterus. So there's been amendments to this act in the last several years to cover children within the uterus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of abortions and so forth. But it does not make a specific mention of a child outside of the uterus, which is obviously the issue here, right? With in vitro fertilization, you remove an embryo from the uterus and you clinically fertilize it in a laboratory setting. So technically, the claim from the hospital is that this does not fall under wrongful death of the minor. So they lost in the initial in the initial trial, and so these hospitals appealed to the Alabama Supreme Court, which maintained the decision that that these embryos do qualify as children.
Yeah. Okay. But the big question, and
So I
now,
think that covers.
yeah, that covers most of the what's going on.
Yep.
Yep. But the major thing, and when Delta gets here, we can get further into it. For what he believes is, what are our thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I think I don't know. Me personally, I don't see a moral issue with in vitro fertilization itself. But I do take issue with the ruling. I think it's a little absurd as it stands,
Yeah.
and I think there are a couple glaring issues with the position that the Alabama Supreme Court has taken. the ways that they came to the conclusions that they did, and their underlying motivations for that. Um, but I think a lot of it falls outside of the scope of is this a child itself, and more so within the scope of what is ethical for the court to determine. What are the ethical processes that should go into this, and so forth. But um, I don't know how much further I want to get into this without Delta here.
Yeah, Delta just said he got home, so. But I
Yep,
also
there we go.
yeah, but I also agree. It's not a person. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
No, and I think the way that they came to that conclusion is dubious, and I think it's fundamentally absurd. It's very absurd. I mean, it's a weird line in the sand to draw. But like I said, I think the bigger issue I have with it is how they're drawing that line, not so much the line itself. I think there's a broader discussion to be had about personhood before birth in terms of abortion, but uh, this Supreme Court ruling itself, I think, has much more glaring issues that, from a libertarian perspective, uh, should be of much greater concern than uh, than the personhood question. But
yeah,
I guess it all ultimately ties together.
yeah. It's a little messed up. What's been going on throughout the U.S. in terms of abortion and stuff.
Absolutely. Hmm. And I think this case touches on a lot of it because ultimately, it is a southern state, and there are very heavy religious motivations, as I'll discuss later, in this decision, which I think is really the crux of a lot of the issues that the United States has encountered up to this point, in terms of the abortion debate today, which is rectifying, where does religion stand in government, um, which I think is a very important question. If you hold that people should have their own beliefs, that they should have the right to hold their own beliefs, then I think you should value religious freedom, because that is, the ultimate ability to hold your own belief, right? You're saying,
Yeah,
I have this objective view of the world, but I recognize other people have a view of the world that they say is objective. So I think that should be valued very, very highly by libertarians. Um, and I think this ruling touches on a lot of the concerns that crop up with that. But
yeah. I'm having a little problems with the stream. The bit rate's a little low. My internet's probably not doing so
oh,
hot.
absolutely,
Uh, no, the internet's doing good. Hold on.
no problem at all. I don't know if you're speaking to me, but I can't hear you at all. So,
Yeah, I muted my mic. Just hold on.
oh, for sure. Well, while we're waiting, I suppose ramen is a very good dish. I think everybody should have ramen on hand. It's a great idea to have ramen available for those lazy nights. Not sponsored.
Seems like the bit rate's fucked up right now. I don't know what's going on. There's Delta. Uh, hey Delta, we're having some technical difficulties at the moment.
Is it something where you think you can log out and log back in? Oh, he's got the sunglasses and everything.
The bit rate's just really fucked right now. I have it playing on my phone as well. Yeah, it fucking freezes every once in a while. Uh,
Interesting.
Delta's still muted.
Delta, I'm not sure.
I can't hear you,
Yeah.
Delta. We can't hear you. Let me um let me stop the stream, start it back up. Let's see. Bit rate at almost 6,000.
Still can't hear you there, bud.
I don't have this problem before. What's going on?
Your green circle briefly popped up, Delta. Very briefly. So whatever you did just a second ago, yeah, apparently
Oh,
worked.
does it? Mikkel said the stream's fine for him, so maybe we just keep going.
All right. Sounds good.
I restarted it, so it
Hello?
says it's
Hello?
hello.
There we go.
Bitrate is too high. Don't know what that means. The regular stream frame drop.
Oh, interesting.
2%. Mikkel has no issues. Okay. All right.
There we go.
All right. We got 5 viewers. One of them's like 2 of them is me though.
Oh, no kidding.
2 of them's me.
Well, I apologize for being late.
No, you're good. You're good. You're about like 10 minutes late, so.
We should probably push it a little bit further then, because I literally just got home.
Okay, we can do 8 o'clock. We can do 8 to 10. That'll work.
I'm sorry, but that's just how it is.
I can push it back from 8 to 10 then. No problems.
Okay.
All right. Anyways, so McGuire gave a little synopsis of what's going on. Oh, Joker. Thanks, Joker. I know I'm cute. Thank you. Anyways, yeah, so McGuire gave a little synopsis of what's going on, little detail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it time for my hot take?
It's time for your hot take.
Go for it.
It's about we're talking about Alabama, right? Just
Yeah.
to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so
the IVF stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so my hot take is that I actually agree with Alabama that a fertilized embryo that is frozen should count as a human being, and that we should treat it as such, and that we should not dispose of them as not a human being. So basically, if you make a human embryo and you freeze it and you put it on ice, you better do something about that later. Like, you better unfreeze that person and make that person a person someday.
Okay. Well, this gets into the crux of everything of, is it a person? When does personhood start?
Well, when does it start for you, Sonic?
So for me, pretty common sense when consciousness begins, which is usually around 24 to 26 weeks, but I'm even willing to bring it down to 20 should be the cutoff.
The bare minimum?
The bare minimum.
Okay. What about you, Mr. McGuire?
Yeah, I think I have a line. Okay, I have religious beliefs that pertain to this. I think personhood does begin at fertilization personally, but as far as what I would govern on, I think it's important to draw a line in the sand between secular and religious belief, and recognize that biologically speaking, there is no clear point. So I think that the line should be drawn where a fetus can physiologically support itself independent of a mother. So obviously, that varies. There's not, a clear point where it suddenly happens, but I think if you're trying to separate religion from state and you're trying to be secular about your governmental decisions, the point where it is an independent organism is where that happens.
So we could abort at literally right before birth, basically.
I think that's probably extreme. I think discretionarily it should be up to a medical professional to make the call of, is this thing able to support itself or not. I think that's one of those issues where, again, it varies. There's premature babies that are very premature but do survive, and there's babies that take longer to develop. It's not a clear-cut thing. It varies from person to person. So I think that there has to be some sort of professional discretion, not motivated by religious belief, to make that call.
Okay. So you'd be okay with aborting a perfectly would you be I shouldn't try to phrase this in a shitty way. Would you be okay if a medical professional so a woman goes in and she says, I would like to have an abortion, and the baby is, according to the medical professional, viable, it's healthy, whatever. But the woman says, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter really, but she just says she can't support the baby. Would it be ethical for the medical professional to then agree and say, yes, if this fetus, this baby cannot be supported by this woman, it would be better to abort it? Would you say that's ethical, or what would your take on that be then?
Yeah, so as far as what I think should be allowed, because again, personally, I'm Catholic. I don't personally support the abortion measures, but I think secularly, if it's not able to support itself outside the mother, then I view the fetus or embryo or whatever stage of development we happen to be at as an accessory organ to the mother. It's an extension of the mother's uterus. It should be her call to do with it what she wants. It's part of her body, biologically speaking. So if the medical professional makes that call, and obviously medical professionals should be accountable to a licensing board, their decisions should be scrutinized. There should be accountability for that. But if they make that call with their licensure on the line, with their professional discretion, that the fetus is unable to support itself outside of womb, then yes, I think it should be within the mother's right to do with that as she wishes.
Okay. So, okay. I vehemently disagree. Very hardcore. And I'm not even religious. It's funny because you're Catholic, and I mean, I guess I was raised Catholic, but not really. Like, I never really believed. And I personally believe that life it does begin at conception, and it just happens to be that the fetus has to take up residence within inside another person because that's how biology is. Like, and I don't see why the circumstances of biology dictate whether or not another human, another entity has humanity or not. So
Sure.
I personally believe that life begins at conception, and barring like, I'm not saying there shouldn't be any way for a woman to remove a fetus from her body, but I don't believe in abortion for the overwhelming majority of cases. I think that if there's going to be an abortion, so to speak, it needs to be very extenuating circumstances, and they need to be almost like, it just needs. Yeah, I'm gonna beat that horse to death, basically. So you get it.
No, for sure. I think that the issue for me as it stands is that there is no clear science. I don't like using the word scientific. That makes me feel like I'm go Reddit, but I don't think that there's a clear physiological point where life does begin. Those cells are alive before fertilization. All they're doing is combining. Cells divide every day. There's not a special point where human consciousness suddenly begins. All that happens is some really ultimately statistically probable event happens with two cells meeting each other. There's no clear point. So I think when you say that life begins at fertilization, there's not life beginning there, physiologically speaking. You're ascribing some sort of higher, abstract, non-quantifiable significance to the event of intercourse, which I think is fine. That's within people's rights. I think people should be able to make those decisions. Say, hey, I think this holds some sort of meaning to me. I think this holds some sort of religious significance, but I don't think that should be forced onto others, because if you have a belief that ultimately relies on some abstraction that's unique to you, it is religious. You're holding something true by faith. And so if you're going to have a system where, go ahead.
I just want to pause you, and I want to say I do agree with you. Like, I fully admit that I'm choosing conception as an arbitrary point. I'm not. I mean, personally, I'm not choosing it for religious reasons in terms of like Christianity or anything. I do agree with you that it is based on an article of faith that I believe that life begins at conception, therefore it does to me. So I just want to I don't want to I don't want people to think that you're talking down to me. I fully agree with what you're saying, and your description of what I believe is accurate.
No, for sure, and I appreciate that. I think, like I said, I have those beliefs myself, but I don't. I don't think it's just to make those the rule of the land and hold others to those beliefs. If you can't make a clear secular rationale that doesn't require faith for why that should happen. I think normally, when we say murder is bad, it's because you're very clearly infringing on another person's very obviously independent being. We say, torture is bad, rape is bad because you're very clearly aggressing on another individual. But when the lines get muddied like this, I think it's important to try and shy away from those faith-based articles. But like I said, I'm Catholic. It is challenging for me to make those decisions, not those decisions, but to advocate for that position. And I do respect where anti-abortion advocates come from, because that's something I personally believe and something I would personally hold myself to. I wouldn't abort a child because, I didn't want the child. It's just a question of where I think government comes into the picture.
So it's interesting because while you were going on your description of what I guess fair law is, and I do agree that if you can't describe it in a secular sense, you shouldn't really describe law at all. Like, I believe that right exists whether or not God exists, right and wrong exists whether or not God exists.
Absolutely.
But that's me personally. But it's interesting that you brought up murder, because there's a couple different ways to frame why murder is wrong and by extension illegal. And one key way we determine it is it's by the golden rule. Now, a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's a Christian ethic," but I disagree. And I think John Rawls, who I cannot love enough, and it's funny because Rawls was actually pro-abortion, but like Rawls had a description for what when it came for like how to determine what is or isn't ethical. And it was basically it's called the it's called the veil of ignorance. And the basic idea is you can pick which society, like, so you exist before society somehow, like you're like he has this thought experiment where you're this conscious being before society, or before you exist in society, and you get to pick which society you're born into, and you get like three choices. One is pure inequality, one is pure equality, and I forget what the third one is, but basically Rawls says you would want to pick the society with pure equality because you would have the best chances of living the best possible life
Mhm.
that you could live. Um, and like I said, Rawls was actually pro-abortion. He kind of took what you said, McGuire, about how it is up to the mother's decision, because he did agree with you basically that the fetus was an extension of the mother, and if the mother wanted to have something removed from her, she ought to be able to. I actually disagree, and again, this is arguably, I mean, it's not arguably, it is an article of faith, but like, to me, just looking back at my life and my development, if I existed, like somehow I existed before I was conceived, and then I was conceived, and I could feel or hear my parents basically in the womb saying, "Oh, well, we might want to abort him." I wouldn't want that. Like, if I could like fast forward to now and look at the life I'm living now, I would want, and I know that's not pure Rawlsian, but like, of the potential lives I could be living, I could be living a bunch of potential lives, and I would want to live those potential lives as opposed to not. And so, in that veil of ignorance, from my perception, I would want to be born into a society without abortion. And that's how I couch abortion. It's basically, if I had the chance, I would not want to be aborted. I feel that's how everyone is, to be honest.
Absolutely. I think that's a very defensible position. So I think that the question I'd ask from there is, what's your take on broader methods of contraception, right? Condoms, IUDs, things like that.
Oh, real quick, I do want to say thank you for saying it was defensible, but I just want to say my entire thesis relies on a bunch of assumptions and articles of faith. So I'm not. I like to try to be objective, but like in this case, I'm just saying, hey, this is how I feel, and that's how it is. To answer your question about contraception, though, um, with contraception, it's different because the sperm and the ovum by themselves will never, like, they'll never become a human being ever under any circumstances ever. It's impossible because of how our biology works. So I I'm not one of those people who, every time someone jerks off, it's not a holocaust. I don't believe in that. And every time a woman has her period, it's not a literal murder of a potential human being. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that a miscarriage is murder either. And I don't think we ought to treat miscarriages that way. And the compromise I would make with pro-abortion people is that, hey, let's ban abortion, but if a woman has a miscarriage, we shouldn't investigate it. And I would like I'm not a utilitarian, but I think that would be the most utilitarian approach where it satisfies everyone. Where yeah, there's gonna be women who miscarry their children, but like for the most part, abortion is stopped. And I think that to be the real politique, I think that's like the happy medium we would have to accept.
The internet's still fucking crapping out for some reason. You're good with internet, right,
Dang.
Delta?
Get out and push.
You're good with internet though, right?
Yeah, I'm great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Oh well.
So,
People listen to
Okay.
podcasts, they don't watch it. Who cares?
well,
Yeah.
the problem is that it's lagging and it's buffering a lot. That's the
Oh,
problem.
is it?
That's the problem.
Oh, so we're breaking up.
Apparently so. I don't know why. It was working fine and then it just fucking dropped. I don't
Oh
think there's
well.
anything else on the internet.
Doesn't matter.
I mean, it kind of does, since I want people to watch.
For what it's worth, you're coming through fine on my end. I'm not
Yeah.
watching the stream, but you on Discord sounds fine.
Okay. Maybe it's the fucking. I don't know. I don't know what.
I wouldn't. I
Uh,
mean, I'm gonna be honest. Let's just push on. It doesn't
okay.
matter.
All
Like,
right.
you're recording this, right?
Yeah, I'm also recording it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's just record it and upload it, and it doesn't matter.
Okay. All right. We'll just push through, I guess.
Yeah. Push through.
Just push through. All right. Just like those fetuses.
Alrighty.
Just like those fetuses, we'll push through.
Yeah. Wait, are we aborting them or are we pushing them out?
Whatever the way you want.
Oh, Roe v. Wade's out the window, so
I'm pro-abortion. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, what you said earlier is literally pro-abortion before 20 weeks is basically what you agreed with.
Yeah, which makes the most sense in accordance to how we define what a person is.
mm-hmm.
Wait, what do you mean by we? Like the state? I mean,
As
sure,
in,
but
like,
I mean, like me personally.
as a society, the way we determine end of life, we should have that same factor for the beginning of life as well.
I mean, I think it's different with the end of life versus the beginning of life, because when it comes to the end of life, especially like most end of life care tends to happen when people are really old. That's not to say that people don't die young. I mean, people die young all the time, but like, I think when you encounter an end of life situation or a situation where there's a potential for end of life, the number of paths close pretty quickly, and eventually, if someone has stage 4 cancer and it's metastasized and it's all over their body, there's not much they can do. Like, there's no secret. We're trying to develop medicines that'll fix that, but like, at that state, it's pretty much done. Or if someone's in a coma and they've been brain dead for months on end, and I mean, there's very little chance that we're going to revive them.
Yeah. Well, it's
whereas
not
like with a fetus.
Well, it's not the type of care, it's just the classification, how we determine. So the way we normally determine end of life is like when consciousness ceases. I think we should have that same factor for the beginning of life as well, when consciousness begins.
Yeah, but again, and this is, again, I'm gonna admit it's an article of faith, but I don't like the potential that there's this time period where there's this thing that exists. It is, it's the fetus, and as McGuire would say, it is an extension of the woman, of the female. But like, it's this thing that will probably, I mean, unless something goes wrong, it's probably gonna have consciousness.
But why do we?
I'm just uncomfortable with that.
But why do we care about the potentiality of something? I still don't understand why we care about potentials. When do we care about potentials with anything else?
Well, it's funny because I actually don't like potentials when it comes to a lot of other things, but when it comes to, I don't know, I get really sensitive with the fetus because, like I said, how I approach it is I look at it and think, what if that was me in that
Well,
situation?
sure.
How would I want people to treat me?
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't have those kind of feelings. It doesn't have the capability of feeling because it doesn't have that consciousness. So it wouldn't even
No, no,
know.
no. I'm not saying that the fetus literally that the fetus believes that. Although I do think life inherently wants to try to live and survive, but that's a
Sure.
different discussion. But I'm saying just from I would want people to treat me that way even if I didn't think that way, if that makes sense. Like I would not want people. There are people out there that I don't know and I don't know exist, but I would want them to treat me fairly and nicely. And so, by extension, ought to treat those people who I don't know exist fairly and nicely too. And I apply basically the same principle in the same way.
Would you care
Fetuses.
about animals then? In that case, since they have more consciousness and more, in a sense, life than a fetus does.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the issue is that like animals do suffer, and I do agree that like what we do to animals is awful and terrible, but damn, they are delicious. So I am a bit of a hypocrite there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you never tried fetus before, so you might be surprised with that one.
I need to start eating fetus.
Yeah.
Oh
I
boy.
can't have an opinion on fetus until I eat it.
Don't worry, it's only light cannibalism. It's diet cannibalism.
Oh
I mean,
boy.
that's a different discussion. But like, you swallow, skin cells in your mouth every day. Is that cannibalism? If a woman, has a miscarriage, like, but she absorbs some of the fetal cells, is that cannibal? Like, I don't know. Like,
If a
there
woman
we're
eats
in,
her
we're in some weird
placenta.
territory with that.
But no, so for at least as a society, we tend to not care about potentials for things. Uh, and so I don't see why we should do that for fetuses as well. Sure, we can have this feeling, this empathy or sympathy or whatever for that fetus. Like, well, what if it was me? But it doesn't have the capability of that kind of feeling without that conscious state of mind.
No, listen. I understand what you're saying, but like I'm saying that's irrelevant. Like it doesn't matter. Like in a way, it's like it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what the fetus thinks. If the fetus wants to kill itself, like okay, cool. But like in my perfect scenario, we wouldn't care if the fetus wants to kill itself, and only after it turned 18 and purchased a firearm at your local gun store and one shotgun shell. That's when it would matter. But before that, who cares?
Okay. You got anything to
Listen,
say?
I'm not
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
just real quick. I'm not arguing. I will freely admit I'm not arguing something that is like internally logical or consistent. I'm just saying like, listen, I have this feeling, and this feeling is I don't want to die, so we should apply that to other people.
Yeah. Anything you want to weigh in on, McGuire?
No, I think Delta makes a defensible point that I can that sympathize with again because I'm coming from that background of faith where I do subscribe to these ideas. I just think that the line should be drawn where it is I'd regard it as a religious idea,
Yeah.
even if it's not specifically you're saying it's part of a religion. It's still anything faith based I'd say is religious. And I don't think that anybody has any business forcing those ideals onto others. Certainly not in a free system where you purport to defend, freedom of religion.
Yeah. Uh, would you have any kind of empathy or sympathy for the women who have to go through pregnancy as well, an unwanted pregnancy?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so I do agree, and we should. I think if a woman like I hate the abortion debate because most people, and I'm not saying you two, but most
Yeah.
people when it comes to abortion, they like to frame the debate in these really, and you guys haven't done this, but I'm just giving background to
Yeah.
how I think of this. Um, a lot of people when it comes to abortion, they make the claim that like, well, what about these very rare circumstances where it happens, like rape and incest, or a woman just in general, like you guys are saying, a woman who if we implemented my perfect utopia that there would be no abortions ever. I would say, listen, if the woman is forced to undergo this against her will, I do agree that at some level society should come together and provide for her and assist her in this. And I think at the very least, if we're not willing to allow the woman to abort the baby, we should provide for her and help her through until the kid is of age and things like that. I would be perfectly okay with having a welfare state, building a welfare state, even though I hate welfare with a passion. I would be perfectly okay with building a welfare state as long as it was to stop people from aborting babies,
Okay.
which is
Uh,
very utilitarian. I hate utilitarianism.
well, the ideal society would be one without abortion. However, there will always be some kind of abortion, so you want to try to mitigate the damages that can be resulted from
Yeah.
back straight abortions, back alley abortions. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Mhm.
I'm I'm gonna freely admit I'm like running back and forth between like arguing this ideal utopia and then like immediately jumping to the other side and saying, well, in this real situation, like this is how we should actually do it. So I'll freely admit that like I'm not being consistent on anything in this, but
Yeah.
I think abortion is like one of the few things that like consistency is really hard to do without being weird or awful.
Well, I
So
mean, I'm pretty consistent with mine, where in terms of consciousness, it involves
and you're weird and awful. I'm just kidding.
No,
I'm just kidding.
I freely admit that I'm a terrible fucking person. Yeah, but we all are in our own
No,
ways.
you're fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
like Delta killing like 20 different Iraqis.
I haven't killed anyone. By the way, the kids at school did ask today if I killed anyone.
Oh jeez.
And I gave them
Well, there
I
you go.
told them exactly what I told you guys. I said no, but that's a really not good question to ask.
No, you should have
so.
said only the bad. You should have said only the bad kids.
Okay. Fired on the first day.
Yeah. But anyways,
But
what
no.
about you, McGuire?
Yeah, no, I think in regards to the unwanted pregnancy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I can empathize, I suppose, with being in a situation that you find yourself in that you don't want to be in, but um I don't, again, personally, I don't think that abortion should be an out for that. Outside of exceptional cases where it's medical necessity, at risk of health or life. But um, I do again hold that I think that it should be something available if that is something that they want to do, because I view that fetus as an extension of their body. That said, society, is very accustomed to this idea of adversity, right? There are many things in life that you encounter that are bad, that are severe, that are major setbacks, and very painful, very challenging. But there's this idea in society that we overcome it, right? Because you inevitably encounter roadblocks in whatever you're trying to do. So to that end, I do think that that this idea of seeing abortion as an out for pregnancy um, is very normalized. When I think that unwanted pregnancies, accidents, and so forth should be viewed as another one of these adversities, right? It's one of those things where um, it's something that just happens. And so
Yeah.
again, personally, I don't, morally speaking, from a religious perspective, I don't think that you should compromise another life for the convenience of your own, unless that life is directly threatening you. But if somebody else has different values, it should be their right
Well,
to exercise them.
well, there's different ways it can harm you, not necessarily just physically, right? You have physically, financially, emotionally, etc. So.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that that's something that people should be left to rectify on their own. They should determine where their own limits are and what
Yeah.
their own values say they should or should not do given their circumstances.
Okay.
Another thing to add, I think it's very easy to talk from this perspective of obviously I'm a man who has not been pregnant before and
Yeah.
likely never will be. And so, sitting here and saying, well, you should have this morality towards, this unborn child that you don't have any care for. It's easy for me to take that position, but
Yeah.
it's another one of those reasons why people should be free to make a decision on their own when they find themselves in that situation.
Didn't you say the other day that up till the umbilical cord gets clipped,
Yeah. That was mostly as a joke.
That's a
That was
joke.
my natural. Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, this is the natural extreme of the position I'm taking.
Oh no, no,
But
that's not the extreme.
obviously,
That's not the extreme. The extreme is up to 18 years.
there we go.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's. I mean, I listen. If we're gonna have abortion and children aren't people until they're 18, it just makes sense that we have abortion at
Late
17.
term.
Yeah,
No, just bring the what's
55 months
no, just
post-abortion.
bring the adult age down to like as soon as the umbilical cord gets clipped or something.
There we go.
You
You're
can vote as a baby.
you're 1 year old. You
Quickly
can
pushing
vote.
a couple twins out.
I mean, but we laugh, but like this is the silliness that we live in because there are a lot of inconsistencies. Like you can, you can drive at 16, but you can't vote until you're 18, and you can't buy a gun until you can't buy a handgun until you're 21, and they
Yeah.
want to raise the drinking age, or the drinking age is 21. They want to raise the smoking age to 21. It's like there's all these inconsistencies. It's like why don't we just have like one or two ages where everyone is an adult and everyone isn't, and that's it. Like,
Just bring
I don't
everything
know.
up to 21. Everything 21, and then you're good.
No, I'd say 18.
You say
Like,
18.
I think you should be able to do whatever you want. Yeah.
Okay.
Reasonable. I mean, if you're gonna take that approach, if you can die for your country at 18, I think
Well-
you should have the right to live in your country freely at 18.
You can go to boot camp at 17. So I think
Right. So
17,
push it back.
18.
Nah, just
Yeah.
raise that up. Boost that up.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't like the idea of pushing adulthood later. I think a major problem is that adults don't become adults until later. I definitely did not feel like I was an adult until I was in my early to mid 20s.
hmm
So, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's just because of all the shit. So, I think we should try to make people adults as fast as possible.
Right.
Uh,
If we're gonna, champion this freedom and this liberty and whatever,
Yeah.
people should be encouraged to make use of that for as much of their life as they can. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just turning the heat on in my house because it's been off all day and I'm freezing.
Get a heated blanket.
no worries at all.
And I was soaking wet because I just rode back on my motorcycle from work.
Damn.
But, anyways,
There you go. So Sonic, I know you said that you didn't completely read the document here, but Delta, did you read through the actual rolling the page at all versus?
I've read through most of it. I wouldn't say I read through all of it, but
Sure.
I got the main point of it. And it's funny because what I took away from it is that what most people are freaking out about, which is that most people are saying that I've read is that Alabama's banning IFV. And that's not what I read. I read they just said you have to treat the embryo as if it's a person, which if you're gonna have IFV, now I know IFV works, it's a lot more complicated than what I'm about to make it out to be, but if you're gonna have an IFV, the idea is that you make the number of embryos that you need and no more.
Right. Yeah. I think it's not even that extreme. If I'm reading this right, it's just saying that the hospital is accountable for punitive damages equivalent to the
Yeah.
death of the minor in
Yeah.
response to this.
Yeah.
I think I had a few takeaways that I think are much more egregious than the actual substance of that itself. I mean, I don't care particularly much about a lawsuit against a hospital. It's a massive corporation; they can deal with it.
Yeah.
But I think it does set a bad precedent in terms of judicial rulings. I think the most egregious thing I saw, Chief Justice Parker's opinion on page 33 onwards, discusses almost entirely religion, specifically Christianity.
Yeah.
And he
didn't
goes
like
on
that.
for not at all. He goes on for several pages citing the Bible, citing multiple different verses, the Ten Commandments. At one point, he even started bringing up like mega church pastor books on the history of what life means to followers of Christ, which is a very terrible precedent. That's a very far reach from this idea of separation of church and state, and I think it's a blatant violation of the First Amendment of the defendants in this. because it's very clear that his decision is not made on legal precedent; it's made on religious precedent, which it shouldn't be. It's not brought up in the actual ruling itself, but it is brought up very heavily in his opinion on it. So I think that is something that should be addressed and something that should be rectified. Because, like I said, before, I think the utmost concern should be this idea of separating religion from state, and especially separating blatant religion from state. If we've gotten to the point where a judicial figure, a chief justice no less, is making rulings citing the Bible as cause, I think that should be a major point of concern, and it's rather hypocritical too. At a different point, on page 22, I believe the court's official opinion states that the court's role here is to adhere to the letter of the law, claiming that their role is not to interpret the case itself, but rather interpret its validity under Alabama state law, which I think is wrong in and of itself. If you have judicial review, then you have the ability to have discretion against state law. But that fact aside, I don't see how the court can claim that they're adhering to the letter of the law when their chief justice himself is very clearly adhering to the letter of the Bible, which are two very separate things. I think that those were the two biggest concerns on my part. I didn't really like reading that at all. That seemed very concerning to me, and it sets a pretty bad precedent for Alabama's Supreme Court in terms of where their loyalties lie, and their adherence to the First Amendment specifically.
Yeah, that's hilarious that he says that we need to be strict with the letter of the law and things like that, because courts all the time, literally every day, will rule and make decisions, and they will base their rulings and decisions not on actual statutes that the legislature passed, but rather precedents that were created by other courts with tests. Like the Supreme Court will all of the U.S. The U.S. Supreme Court will all the time create a test on how to test a constitutional law and things like that. There's no statute with that. I mean, it's one of the things I rail against with judicial review is that the legal system all the time makes up some non-statute way of determining what law is, and then they'll apply it. And we see it in this case very clearly, as you've described, is that he's applying biblical law, which no one in the US has passed as far as I'm concerned. And okay,
Absolutely.
cool. America was founded as a Christian nation because, some founding father at one point said that only moral enough, religious people can uphold a constitutional republic. But okay, cool. But where's the law, man?
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. And to add insult to injury at that point, the court's specific quote about their role being to adhere to the letter of the law was in response to the hospitals, the defendants in this case, bringing up that the implications of this lawsuit would make IFV very inaccessible, make it prohibitively costly, and essentially completely restrict its use in Alabama. And the court's position was that, if I'm recalling correctly, those are fair arguments, but they should be made before a legislature. Which even setting aside the Christianity part, I don't care for that. Again, this is the Supreme Court of the state that's given itself, as you pointed out, this ability of judicial review. So at this point, if they are to claim that they have this divine rule to verify the constitutionality of state laws, either against the U.S. Constitution or the Alabama Constitution, if they're going to claim that they have this role as a Supreme Court, then they should take this opportunity where they're passing a de facto restriction on a commercial service to assess whether the legislature that they're passing that de facto restriction on is legitimate, to assess whether it's within their right to pass that restriction, to assess whether it should go to a different branch of government, whether this is congruent with the Constitution in general. It should be something that they should consider in the moment. And blatantly saying that you should take that before the legislature is just a complete cop-out. And very disgusting. It's just laziness. A court should not defer to a lower court, nor should it defer to some other agency or organization to try and keep away from considering a case. And this isn't the first point in this in this trial that they've deferred elsewhere. At a different point, the defense brings up that that the plaintiffs actually contractually agreed that embryos may be destroyed. It varied between the plaintiff families, but generally after 5 years, embryos were contractually able to be destroyed. That was in the agreement that these families signed. Other families signed agreements saying that if there were some sort of birth defects or other medical conditions, the embryos may, at the discretion of the hospital, be donated for medical research and then promptly destroyed after the fact. And so the defendants in this case bring this up as evidence that that these families were prepared for the risk of embryos being destroyed and that they agreed to this. And the court held. Let me see if I have the exact quote here. They held something to the effect that let me see. We are a court of appeal, not a first action, per Henry v. White, holding that they can't make a ruling on this because the defendants hadn't brought this up in the original trial, which again I think is complete laziness, because the court is refusing to hear pertinent evidence, and it's deferring to a lower court. They flat out said you can take that back to the original trial court and try again there. It's just a very clear-cut case of Alabama State Supreme Court refusing to actually function as a court and outright not hearing pertinent evidence to this case in favor of making a swift ruling. I think it's rather disgusting, and it shows a lack of willingness to do their jobs.
So, again, I'll rail against judicial review because that's what I love
Absolutely.
doing.
Yeah.
But I see whenever I see issues like this appear in a court, like in a Supreme Court specifically, whether it's the U.S. Supreme Court or State Supreme
Mhm.
Court, and the court is basically making law, I believe it is incumbent and it is a duty of the legislature to pass some sort of law in reference to this, because I don't believe courts can make law, but two, if there's this confusion, it is up to the legislature, because the legislature is what defines what law means. I don't believe that courts do. The legislature, by drafting the law and passing it, is what defines what laws are. And
Mhm.
I believe it is up to the Alabama Supreme or the legislature to draft a law, whether to ban IFV or to regulate it or whatever, or completely let it go free forever. Who cares? I mean, in the end, that's their job. And if we're having these issues, it's because the legislature is lazy. And what I really hate about these rulings is that a ruling will come down, and the legislature will basically say it's been decided. Our hands are we can't do anything about it. It's like, no, that's your job. You need to do something about it. But the legislature kind of it defers to the court rather than taking up its role as defining law and crafting laws to defining law by crafting it.
Absolutely, yeah. Nope, it's a failure of government to keep pointing the finger at somebody else,
Yeah.
when really you're just shoving responsibility off on other people, and then that's how we get these situations where there's decisions being passed in questionable ways, um, with no
Yeah.
accountability,
Yeah.
that everybody just has to take as this divine gospel of the state.
Yeah, that's the worst part, is that these judges, I mean, like in Oregon where I live, we elect our Supreme Court justices
Mhm.
to the Oregon Supreme Court. So they're not, I mean, there is some accountability, but I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, those judges win with very high margins of victory and they stay on there forever. I mean, it is almost no different. And so, like, in general, like, we should not be allowing courts to create law. Like, we should just not allow that in general. And the fact that we do and we think that this is okay, it's a major sickness. And not only that, it causes instability in the system, because where we should be arguing with people and fighting people is at the ballot box over representation, and getting over convincing representatives to support or be against laws, not at at a Supreme Court or at the Supreme Court fighting over hoping and praying that 9 old people or 7 or 5, because I know some states have 5, you know,
Mhm.
X number of old people vote the way we want. Like we should be more active in our system because our system is one of action and action at the lowest level by the individual. And when you give that to the Supreme Court of wherever, you're giving that up basically.
No, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
it's a concern to be sure.
Yeah, this just all goes back to what we last discussed about judicial review. Yeah. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, it's a major problem, and there America has a bunch of problems, but judicial review is like easily in my top 3 major issues because the court will make a decision and then like 50 years later reverse that decision, and in the meantime m- millions of people have been affected by it, and it's
mhm.
like they should have never been able to be in the position to make the decision in the first place. Like it should
Yeah.
be up to the legislature and the responsibility of the people, because the the people are responsible for our legislatures. We are responsible for who we vote for. If or if we obfuscate that by giving power to a court that is appointed by someone else, and yeah, they're confirmed by the legislature, I mean, I just don't see it as healthy.
Yeah. Should we just get
Absolutely.
rid of the Supreme Court altogether?
No, they do have, I mean, the US Supreme Court definitely not. They do have some original jurisdiction that I think is legitimate, like I mentioned last time with the impeachment stuff. But I do think that there is a case to be made that the Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, the US
Yeah.
Supreme Court ought to exist because it is basically it should act as an arbiter between big groups of people, whether it's within the federal government, between the federal government and the states, between the people in the federal government, et cetera, or even between a state and an individual, like we saw with the Bruin case in the Bruin decision in New York, and that basically the firearms one that came down recently. Like there
Mhm.
is a lot of original jurisdiction for the Supreme Court to settle disputes. I just don't like the idea that they're they're crafting law in their decisions. Like I think
Well,
it should just be about reversing reversing decisions, not crafting law and
well,
how the law functions.
isn't that the point of common law? Setting precedent. If the Supreme Court sets a precedent, then that's kind of how it goes until a different precedent is set.
No, I'll give you the history of common law because it's a good way to explain it. Um, in 10 I'm going to be like Vladimir Putin for a second, so get ready. So in 1066 the French invaded England and they
Yeah.
took it over. And they brought over French law with them. The king, William the Conqueror, he brought over French law basically. But in England, there were all these. In England had been invaded numerous times. They'd been invaded by the Romans, and then the Anglos and Saxons, and now the French. So in the Vikings, there was the Danelaw in some places. So there were all these parts of England that had all these different laws and customs local to their area. And what I mean by law is like land ownership. Like this piece of land over here was owned by this family, and this one wasn't. These people had grazing rights to these lands, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So, the king, he would, appoint nobility a fief in different parts of the land, and one of the jobs um, in a lot of feudal places, especially like in England, of the nobility of the local lord was to be a magistrate. Like he would spend, I think, about a quarter of his time settling disputes between the townsfolk, or his people within his fief, and these guys, they were from France. They didn't know anything about the local law. They didn't know whose grazing rights for what or whatever. So these two people would come and they would say, this guy was grazing on my land. And the other guy would say, no, that land was in my family possession for generations. And they just created this practice of, well, we'll just create a jury of local people to review the case and they'll make the decision. And then I, the magistrate, the noble, I'll enforce that. And where the precedent being set came from is that like the idea that if the same situation comes up, we ought to have the same outcome. That's basically where it came from. So common law, if we're going to take like the literal history of it, it literally comes from law as it is commonly understood amongst the people.
Okay.
/ Vladimir Putin.
Just not 30 minutes.
I mean, I am not as long-winded as him, so.
Yeah.
Not as Russian either. I noticed.
Yeah, no. Where's the accent?
Apparently, as just an aside, apparently he speaks perfect English and he
Yeah.
doesn't even have an accent when he speaks English, so.
Yeah, apparently.
AGB.
I could be Putin. You never know.
Well,
That's why he's wearing the glasses. Delta got executed.
doesn't want us to
But,
find out. It's all in the eyes.
Yeah.
yeah, but just in general with common law, like common law, it isn't. I mean, in theory, the people could change how they understood the law, but like I would also argue that like laws have eternal meaning because we passed a law for a specific reason to solve a problem, and in theory, that problem probably doesn't change over time. Like murder, we outlaw murder because murder we don't want people murdering each other through all time, and just because we change the definition of murder to eating a chicken sandwich, and we outlaw eating a chicken sandwich by saying murder is illegal, I we still don't want people killing each other in society. So
Yeah.
I think definitions are kind of eternal.
Well, that's the thing
I'm a
with
very
well,
hard. Oh, go ahead.
well,
Go ahead.
that's the problem with you basically just want the English language to die then, because that's what would occur if we just kept to strict definitions for everything. There's a reason why languages that are alive, they tend to grow in meaning. Different words end up meaning different things sometimes. That's why we have like 50 different definitions of run and set.
I disagree. I mean, English is kind of a really bastard language because it was literally Germanic people who were invaded by the French, so it's Germanic people speaking
Yeah.
French basically.
No, I mean, this happens
But,
in
I
other
mean,
languages as well. Like French does the same thing, German does the same thing, just to a lesser extent than English.
kinda. French. I mean, French is dying because well, I mean, French isn't really dying though
No.
because the African nations are growing.
Yeah.
But French is interesting because the people of France literally have a government bureau dedicated to ensuring that proper French is spoken, and they literally have grammar Nazis, unironically. But I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't really agree with you because like when you go and you want to buy an apple, you're not going and trying to buy a horse because we changed the definition of apple to horse and the definition of horse to apple. Like you want a fruit that falls from a tree and has the characteristics of an apple. And so we ought to keep that. Now, does that not mean we should add words? I mean, I'm not opposed to adding words and creating words like, Riz and looks maxing. I'm fine with that, but like I don't think we should change the definition of other words just because we need new words to define new things.
I mean, you can't really control how a language is spoke amongst different generations. You can try. We've been trying that for years, but then that new generation ends up using things like cap, where it used to be just like regular baseball cap, and now it just means lying. Newer generation,
or cap on a bottle.
Yeah. The newer generations will always change words around just to make it hip, or even add new words like Riz and min-max or all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, slang is different. It's interesting. I was watching a video about slang in the 1920s, and it's interesting because we're going through like slang terms within like a month or two of it coming out. Like looks maxing and Riz and all that is already kind of dying. It's only been a couple months since it came out. Whereas like back in the 20s, they were using dough and chic and um all these different slang terms literally until, I mean, even after the 1920s, like into the 1940s and things like that. So slang is different than I think proper
Well,
language. Like
that's the
slang
thing.
is just
Well, that's the thing.
colloquial.
When it comes to slang, sometimes it sticks. Usually doesn't, like how we
Sometimes.
don't hear those old words anymore, but sometimes it does stick. Like cap seems to be sticking around for quite a while. Will it die in the future? Maybe, but it could be the case where it will get added to the dictionary to just mean lying at some point.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm very skeptical, but
I
that's
mean,
just me.
we've seen this with other smaller words like run, set. There's like 50 to like 100 different definitions just for these two words.
Maybe, but I mean, if you actually look at the very discrete definitions, there are slight variations that they may seem trivial, but they actually are meaningful in the grand scheme of things.
Sure, but they just words overall change from whether what they originally intended to, or they'll keep that and just add a new definition to it to mean something else.
Well, yeah. Well, and what I'm saying is if we have a word that can mean three different things, maybe we need to invent a new word. I think each ideally we ought to go to the dictionary, and each word should have a discrete definition that is specific to that word and nothing else. Discrete, not generally true, discrete.
So, what's your thoughts on synonyms then?
Well, that just sounds the same.
Well, no,
Or it has a
no.
similar meaning, but not as
Well, even
yeah.
they're in a sense interchangeable. They're
But they aren't though. I mean, again, like let's look up some synonyms. But I like there's plenty of synonyms that
sure.
they again on the outside they seem similar, but in the end they are not the same.
It's the way we use them. It's not necessarily the definition of them, but how we use them. And the way we use them is they're fairly interchangeable most of the time.
I listen, I don't okay, so I'm on dictionary.com, thesaurus.com. What is this? What I'm just gonna click a random synonym. Let's go with rage. How about that?
Rage.
Because so rage, the strongest matches for rage are the first one is animosity. Now, rage and animosity are nowhere near the same, I would say. Rage is, I mean, like just as a colloquial sense, if I was enraged at you, Sonic, it would be very overt anger, very like you would know. Whereas animosity is something I would, colloquially I could hide from you. Like we could have we could have polite conversation, but I could be very animus to you and things like that. Next one is bitterness. Very similar, but I mean, again, bitterness. We could be polite, but I could still be bitter towards you. Excitement is a synonym for rage, but I mean, just because I'm excited about something doesn't mean I'm angry about it. You
Uh,
know?
I could say that you're animated, right? That could be
Yeah,
it.
indeed.
Like when someone's enraged, they could be animated, but normally we wouldn't. If you under your thing under strict definitions, that wouldn't be used uh, for that, right? For you moving around a lot to like
Well,
sporadic movement of being enraged.
okay. So the reason why we have synonyms is because we want to have additional descriptors of something, but we don't want to, when we're writing or speaking, we don't want to just say the same thing over and over again. So we have these additional words that have similar
They're
meanings, but
interchangeable.
well, no. But they describe other aspects of whatever we're trying to describe. So, for example, if I was enraged, you know, you could use, Delta was raging at Sonic. He was exasperating at him. He had quite the excitement at Sonic's, at the statement that Sonic said to enrage him. It's all these different words that are describing different factors of a situation of me being enraged at you. They're not the same. They're similar, but they're not the same.
Okay. You got anything to say, McGuire?
Nope. I think linguistics is kind of a weird hill to die on. Not saying either of you are dying on it. It's just always seemed like a weird route to go down for me. So I've just always accepted language as what it is, and seen it as a losing battle to try and understand it. It's a very dynamic thing. It's the essence of how humans interact with the world around them, especially nowadays. So It's a difficult thing to control and quantify, so I just don't bother with it at all.
Okay, so I just looked at some like common whatever. So like common synonyms. For frequent, we could use regular, prevalent, commonplace, typical, familiar. These would all be fairly interchangeable with frequent in how we use it, and would, in a sense, have the same definition.
It's the same colloquial meaning, but I mean, again, I'm going to be very autistic about this and say that it's that they are different. There are very, very minor distinctions.
Well, when it comes to how we use the, so definitions just come from usage, and the way people use things is when they get those new definitions. So like cap's going to be end up lying if that sticks. The way we use regular could mean frequent, it could mean something else. Same thing with prevalent, commonplace, typical. Like these things are have this definition that's similar to frequent, but may not necessarily used to mean that, or have a different definition that could be something completely different.
Sure. And actually, I was just thinking one thing with English, because it has so many progenitor languages, because of the French and the German
Yeah.
and Latin and Greek influences, you're gonna have a bunch of words that probably mean the same thing, but they were introduced in the language at different times by different people and things like that. So English is it's kind of hard to make it do anything because there's just so much going on. It's so confusing and there's so many inconsistent rules.
Yeah. Anyways, are we gonna get back to our abortion IVF stuff? Because
Sure.
we went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, I mean, linguistics is important because
yeah.
law is based on how people mean things and things
Sure.
like that. And our common law system is, like I described, it's based on how people commonly hold it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even the definition of what is a person matters the most in this context.
Yeah,
I mean, to that end.
Yeah, if any side can objectively bring a pound of person and demonstrate where they got it from, they will win the abortion argument, and that's it.
I'm gonna cut off my arm, and that is a part of a person. So
that is a pound of person right
that is
there.
a pound of person.
Your arm. Wow.
Yeah. Checkmate.
Wow.
Checkmate. Liberal.
We did it, boys.
Checkmate. Liberal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
Give this man a Nobel Peace Prize.
No, I think.
Yeah.
If
but
if we want to be consistent, I think it should just be in terms of conscious being.
That's like your opinion, man.
Well, if we want to be consistent and not be arbitrary, like with you at the beginning of life, where is that beginning anyways? Because there's even before, right? Sperm and egg cells, they're alive. So there's
but I already discussed that.
Yeah, but
so,
I think if we want to be,
I already said,
if we want to be consistent with personhood, I think whatever we determine the end of personhood should be the same thing for beginning of personhood. And since we usually describe the end of personhood being conscious being when it ceases, I think we should subscribe the same for the beginning of life as well. The beginning of consciousness being personhood.
Very well.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Since
I think another.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, since consistency matters, and to Delta is objective, so.
No, absolutely. I think I did comment on this in my notes on the actual court case too. I think saying it begins with fertilization is a little absurd, not just from the premise that the cells magically attain some higher form of life, but also from the aspect that it's hard to quantify. Obviously, even if you want to be rough with it and say, okay, 20, 22, 23 weeks, the fetus attains consciousness. In the vast majority of cases, somebody knows how far along they are. And so you can apply that general rule of thumb as sort of, okay, are we at the go or no go point versus fertilization? there's no way to know that happened, right? Many people try to conceive and nothing comes of it. Just the same, many conceptions, they fail. Eventually, the cells fail to implant or whatever, and again, there's no product out of it. So without medical imaging or what have you to test, I don't think you can you can solidly say there's a person here if you can't even solidly say, absent an electron microscope or whatever, that there's a soul here either. So I think that's another difficult thing to try and draw a line on, right? Because if we're going to go with this idea that it begins at fertilization, by that logic, you could say, oh my God, my wife died in a car accident last week and we had sex the day before. She was with child. But that might not have been a thing. That might not have actually happened. And now you have, a man who didn't kill a child, because the fertilization never happened, facing consequence for that. I mean, that's a weird example, but the point is that it's a hard thing to quantify, and I think it's hard to draw that line in the sand if you can't determine that the embryo has actually
Sure. I
embryoed.
mean, I will agree that implantation is probably a better metric. And just in your regard to your example of the car crash and the woman dying, and oh my God, my wife was with a child. I mean, sure, maybe, but prove it. Prove that she was with child. Like, I'm not
But
just.
I think, yeah, that's the crux of the challenge I'm trying to get at here, though. It's a difficult thing to prove that happened. So I think it's hard to draw a line there too, that that the child is present. If it's hard to determine whether implantation happened, whether fertilization actually happened, whether that was actually in progress, I think it's a poor standard to base an entire idea of whether personhood is present on too. Not to say that you can't determine, implantation happened, but if it's exceedingly difficult, I think it's a rough foundation to try and build an entire moral thought on. But
Well, yeah, I mean, there will always be uncertainty.
Bringing up dead mothers and stuff, like dead pregnant women or whatever. This idea of murder in the law currently as it stands, by murdering a pregnant person, regardless of what stage of pregnancy they're in, it is a double homicide. When it comes to
It is
Delta's,
literally a double kill.
yeah, when it double kill. Yeah, you and your fucking Halo shit, yeah. But under the law as it stands, it does partially agree with Delta when it comes to conception. However, I think we should change the law in accordance to what personhood is under my statute.
possibly, I mean, I think like you said before, consistency is good.
Yeah.
But I do think that at that point, then you should try to account for the damage that it causes, because if you do have a family who was planning on a child, and through no fault of their own, no biological action of their own, that was taken away from them, I think that should be acknowledged in some way.
Well, I
That's
mean,
not to say that
there
it
can
was a
be
person, but
yeah. Well, then you have assault battery damages, right? Which those can be fought in court as well. Not necessarily the death of a person, but just assault battery charges.
right. I do think that there should be some sort of standard in place for recognizing that, because you are ultimately taking course of somebody else's life. It's no different than if I break down your door and I rob you, I can face civil suit for breaking down the door, because I damaged the door. It's not to say the door is a person. It's to say that I caused some sort of damages on your person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could put it under like, let's say if someone cut off your arm, right? You would sue them. It could probably be under that kind of statute of damages.
Sure. Right. And as
What
far
about a child then? Like, why do children get this different treatment from a fetus, but also a different one from an adult?
Like, what do you mean? Like, so what do you classify as a child?
So anyone under 18. So like, I go out and
Okay.
murder a 17-year-old like the day before their birthday. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I would be thrown. I think we would all agree that if I did that, like, I should be thrown in jail forever, or for.
Mhm.
I mean, you would
So-
say Sonic for a period of time, but like,
I think
But,
that we
like,
should treat children and adults the same, legally and socially, for the most part.
okay.
For the most part,
I
of
mean,
course.
that's consistent
Yeah, I mean,
for the
some
most part. What's the most part?
like age of consent. I don't think children have the ability
Oh,
to fully consent. You know. But no, like children can't consent. Like they don't have the ability to consent sexually, or have the ability to consent for like contracts and stuff. But under the law,
I was just thinking of that. I
Yeah.
was just thinking.
yeah. But under the law, if you commit a crime as a child, you should be tried as if you were an adult.
I disagree, actually. In my personal opinion, we should treat children like a pet, to be honest. And if your pet goes out and bites someone, you're liable. And if your child goes out and bites someone, you should be liable. That, like, it's not the child, like, it is the child's fault, but like, I think children are, they are wards of their parents, and the parents are responsible for the actions of the child. So if the child does something, if the child goes out and, like, we hear about this all the time, where some rich asshole kid will get drunk, go out and run over, a kid and kill them. I think the parent should go to jail, not the kid necessarily.
Well, what if the kid or the parent didn't necessarily know it was happening? So let's say they may have raised them correctly, but then
Too
this
bad.
one bad thing, and let's say the child took the keys while the parents were asleep and they didn't even realize, and then they went out and hit someone.
I still think too bad.
Okay.
I'm very black and white on that.
Okay.
I
McGuire.
think parental accountability is important.
I mean,
Yeah,
sure.
parental accountability is important, and I think that is lacking in a lot of cases. You can see it all the time reading police reports, and if you watch body cams or whatever, there's instances of children who do have in middle school even lots of history with the police, and mom shows up and takes them into custody, and nothing comes of it. And so at that point,
Yeah.
you're enabling bad behavior by allowing this kid to be disciplined by their parents, and you're allowing the parents to get away with obviously creating a child who's a risk to society. So there should be some sort of system for reflecting a child's actions on their parents and holding them accountable. But I do think that what we define as being a minor is a very broad amount of age, and throughout the entirety of that, there's a lot of variable, mental faculties. There's variable. I'll say a responsibility for your actions, right? You turn 18, you don't magically gain some heightened sense of how to control yourself or heightened sense of responsibility or whatever. There's very little difference in your cognitive, faculties from the day before you turn 18 and the day after. So there should be recognition in the law that parents should be held accountable, but at a certain point, that accountability should start to transition to the child. They should, as they grow older, develop these skills to handle themselves, and if they fail to do so, they should be held accountable like any other member of society.
Okay.
And it's challenging because it's a broad range of ages and mental faculties, and there's no clear point where a switch flips and you become a responsible adult. So there should be a lot of discretion, I think, given to courts on how they handle this. And I don't like the idea of discretion. I think that there's things that should be set in stone. I think that discretion opens the door to corruption and unjust application of rule of law and so forth. But I think this is one of those things where there has to be some wiggle room for a court to go on a case by case basis and say, okay, whose fault is this? Who should be held accountable? Who should be held accountable to what extent? How should we hold them accountable? What should we do to try and rectify this? So I don't think it's crystal clear in that a kid should be tried as an adult every single time, nor that a parent should be tried on behalf of their child every single time. There's a range of circumstances, and that should be reflected in how we handle those cases.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that a child is someone who cannot hold responsibility, and if you cannot hold responsibility, you cannot be charged legally,
Okay, so
and thus somebody else should.
so do you think if an animal does something bad, you should be able to, in a sense, like pop them? Let's say, spank them, pop them in the
Put them
nose,
down.
whatever. Put them down.
Oh,
No,
I thought.
that's
Oh, I
fine.
thought that's what you
That's
meant
how
by
you
pop them.
interpreted it.
No, my bad. My bad. Well, I mean,
Well, I
listen,
mean,
I'm
you can
not
even do
for
that too,
animal.
right? You can even say that too, because you said children should be animals,
Listen,
should be treated as
I'm
animals.
not. I'm not for animal abuse, but if you need to discipline an animal, go ahead.
Okay.
But I'm not for animal
I mean,
abuse.
I
But
could
like,
even say
I mean,
putting an animal down.
If an animal, well, okay, if an animal is attacking you, yes, you get to fight them back and things like that.
I love you. No,
Love you
Oh,
too.
I know.
so
No,
love you too, sweetheart.
they said I love you. Okay, that's my fiance. She's naked right now, so
Nice.
she's trying to go to sleep. It's already 9, but no.
Nice.
I mean, I don't think we should be in a
What,
sense
instead of
be
getting in bed with, he's with the boys.
the boys. Woo! I love the boys. You're my homies. But no, I don't think we should be in a sense spanking, beating, or whatever, emotionally, physically abusing a child in any way.
You cut out.
No, I don't think we should be emotionally or physically abusing, like harming children in any way, just like how we probably shouldn't animals.
Oh, certainly not.
So, I agree, but what about discipline? Like, how?
Well, there's different ways
What
to discipline.
level?
There's different ways to discipline, but
Sure.
as soon as you lay a hand on a child, that's a no in my book.
I don't believe in like closed fists or slapping people.
I'd even
Like,
say
I don't think
spanking.
that's
Spanking
good.
is no good either.
I think spanking can be okay if you don't go too deep into it.
I
If
mean,
it's used very like, I don't know. I was spanked as a kid, and
I was
I only had
too.
to get spanked a couple times to get to figure it out, like what was good and what wasn't.
Well, I mean,
So,
but there's other ways of discipline that are much more effective than physical.
oh, I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. Like my dad. I mean, it was my dad who spanked me, and he never spanked me unless I was really, really, really doing something bad. So it wasn't like first off the boat. Like he definitely had a lot more tools in his toolbox of how to discipline me before he got to the spanking.
But I don't think it should ever get to that point. Like the parent should never physically harm a child or emotionally harm a child in my book.
Well, I don't see spanking as physical harm.
Well, it is, right? You're physically hurting the child in some way, physical harm.
Well, okay, so my mom, she would slap me, and that was different. I don't know why, but that was just different.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. It felt different. Like maybe it's because the authority of my dad, and if my dad was spanking me in my head, it was like, oh, I really messed up. Whereas if my mom slapped me, it was like, well, she just slapped me because I looked at her weird.
I mean, your mom's like a whole different can
So
of beans, yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, I well, yeah, I mean, of course, I'm going to say that, oh, me getting spanked by my dad was different than you and things like that, and so, I'm going to personally disagree and say, well, it wasn't that bad because of me and my personal experiences.
Yeah. Well, this can get to a different topic of, did your parents have the free will to abuse you?
Technically, yes, but I didn't want them to, and I mean, listen, is it the right thing to do? No, but do you have the right to do it? Yes.
Oh, don't fucking do that's cringe, man. Don't fucking do that. No.
Oh boy.
This is being recorded.
Been a few years.
Yeah, this is getting recorded. Yeah. But
Dies of cringe.
I don't think that they had the free will to do that. In a sense, it was a string of causality that got them to that point of physically harming you.
Let's pause for a second. Do they have the free will? Yes.
No.
Is it the right thing to do? No. And that's what I'm saying. Like,
Well,
listen, do you have the ability to abuse your children? Yes. Does that mean you have the right to abuse your children? Yes. Is that what you should do to your children? No.
I mean, we can get into rights if you want. That's a pretty
Oh boy.
yeah. That's a fun one because
That's a can of worms.
rights are simply just privileges dictated by, in a sense, society.
Wrong.
Wrong. You're wrong.
Society, right?
Boy.
Society can say I don't have the right to speak, but unless they physically restrain me from doing it, I'm going to say whatever the fuck I want.
An action isn't a right. Any action can't necessarily be a right. It's simply just a privilege, and if you get damaged legally in some way, then it is simply just not a right. You can do it, but it's not a right.
Well then no rights exist because
Not
at any
objectively,
time
no.
they can be taken away
Yeah.
by anybody.
Exactly. They're not objectively real. They're subjective based on the society that you live in.
Yes, but I'm saying it requires action of other people to interfere with your right. Like in order for your right to be abridged, somebody has to do something about it. Like if I go in the woods and scream and shout all day and there's nobody around to stop me from doing it,
Well,
it will just be my right forever. I
well,
can't they
in the
can't be stopped
woods,
unless God stops me.
well, in the woods, you don't have any rights, which seems opposite of what you could think, but without that protection from
Rousseau?
without that protection, there you don't have a right to anything. Like you could say let's say this is my watch, right? I go in the wild, butt fuck naked. This is my property. This is my watch. It could be taken by, it could get damaged, taken, whatever. I never had a right to this watch.
Rousseau disagrees with you very hardcore, and to Rousseau, the only freedoms you have are in the state of nature, and society is a jail, basically.
Okay. I mean, I disagree clearly, but
You need to read more Rousseau.
well, maybe that can be your book recommendation at the end, right?
Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. What do you
What
got
about
to
you,
say?
McGuire?
What you got? What are our rights? What are rights?
What are rights? I could go the normal American route and say there are God-given testament of land. No, I think rights are something that a society agrees upon. They're a reflection of the society. And I think that society should value certain rights. I think that there should be certain things prioritized. Obviously, for example, I've talked a lot about the freedom of religion today. I think that should be something that should be valued within a society, among other things. But ultimately, I think rights exist within the context of a society allowing them to exist. Granted, I haven't read too many philosophers on the topics of rights. Yeah, so I'll throw that on my to-do list. But my unenlightened take is that you have an implicit social contract, and that social contract is between you and society, and your rights are a reflection of that contract that you and society implicitly agree to.
Well, actually, Reddit.
Well, actually,
So if we're gonna go off of social contract theory, which I didn't bring up, that was Mr. McGuire over there.
yeah.
It
But
was?
the social contract theorist would broadly agree that they would broadly agree with me that the social contract is the formulation of an agreement between the individual and other individuals and the sovereignty of all individuals together agreeing upon what rights ought to exist and what ought not to exist. So like they kind of agree with both of us in that sense because the social contract theorists, especially Hobbes and Rousseau, Locke less so, but Hobbes and Rousseau would argue that man is perfectly free in nature. Now Hobbes says that's a bad thing because nature is chaos, and Rousseau is the opposite, where he says nature is paradise, and Locke is kind of in the middle a little bit. But they would both agree that like man is perfectly free, and that in the foundation of the social contract, man as the individual gives up his right to exist and cohabitate with other in the same area as other human beings.
Sure, that makes sense. So I guess let me amend my statement. I have a perverse social contract theory that's uh,
A dark
partially.
social contract.
There we go.
Dark Brandon.
The dark McGuirean social contract. There we go.
Well, I mean that's what it is though, because if the idea of the social contract originally, even all three would agree that the social contract requires some level. They didn't really say it in this exact way, but they would say it arguably requires implicit or explicit agreement. So implicit means you run into someone on the street and you don't immediately beat the shit out of each other because there's some social norm and behavior, but the idea behind that social norm and behavior is that you both understand that if I don't punch you, you don't punch me, so we'll just live and let live. And that's an implicit social contract, or an explicit one where it is, hey, I'm going to live in the US and there is this social contract called the United States Constitution, which is how we will how our society will determine the laws that we are going to be governed under, and who will implement those laws, and who will, it's the three branches of the government, how we'll change those laws, how we can amend the document. It's like the US Constitution is unironically a social contract, and then it's funny, the Bill of Rights, it's in the beginning of the Constitution, but it was actually the last thing written for the Constitution. These 10 rights tacked on at the end that says, hey, you can't touch their freedom, their freedom of speech. You can't touch their right to keep and bear arms. You can't quarter soldiers in their homes, and so
Yeah.
on and so forth.
Interesting. Okay. No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the founding fathers were kind of fanboys. They were fanboys of Thomas Paine, but Thomas
Mhm.
Paine was a fanboy of John Locke.
Yep.
So
Yep. Could say they had it locked down in their interpretations. Okay.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh, stop. Just stop. No,
One more dab. I swear to God, I'm coming over. Gonna beat your ass.
Yeah. Get rid of that implicit contract. Yeah.
There we go.
he's gonna cancel the implicit contract by punching me in the face.
There we go. Let me just get the plane ticket real quick.
No, I think when it comes to rights, it's just generally an explicit thing. Hey, this is what you can do versus what you can't do. This is what's legal versus illegal, and that contract changes from different societies. Like the U.S. has its own social contract versus the Brits versus the French, Germans, etc. Each one has its own contract and different formation of what rights are.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. There are different implementations of the social contract, and I would say America is the only one that has done it right, and everyone else is drunk at the wheel. But I mean, if the Brits want to pretend that they have a constitution because they have all these legal precedents and traditions, and that somehow makes a constitution, okay, fine. Although they have the Magna Carta, which technically is also technically the Magna Carta is the first implementation of the social contract, and Hobbes was just kind of noting how it worked. But I mean, you know what I'm saying. But like all the other
Yeah.
countries, they don't have a social contract. Like the French,
Well,
they like all of their constitutional laws for the French are like, you have these rights unless the government says no, in which case it's like, well, then you don't have that right.
but the people are the ones that
Yep.
vote those people in, who then create those rules and regulations that dictate what is versus isn't a right, which is a social
Indeed.
contract.
And-
Everyone, it's a general agreement in society based around what you
Indeed.
can and can't do. That's what rights are.
Indeed, and the French don't have the freedom of speech, so if they want, if you're saying something the French government doesn't like, they can go and arrest you.
Sure, and that under their system, that is freedom of speech is not a right.
Yeah, but it's because they have people they have people who enforce it. Now, practically speaking, in France, if you go out and you're not too annoying, you can say whatever you want. The only time they crack down on your right to free speech is when you're being really annoying.
Well, if it's illegal to speak certain things, like I know in Germany, you can't really enforce like Nazi propaganda and stuff. Under German law, and social contract, freedom of speech, like absolute freedom of speech, is not a right like given to you.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, so then rights are privileges in a society of what you can do.
Well, no, but I disagree because it requires state enforcement. Like, so there are a lot of neo-Nazis in Germany, go figure.
Sure.
They're just underground and they talk to each other where, the government can't see. So in the underground where the government can't see, they do have freedom of speech, even though they are within the sovereignty of Germany.
It still wouldn't be a freedom of speech, just because you can do it, and it may not be entirely forced because under that, then it would be people who get away with rape and all that stuff. That is their right to do that because they got away with it. But that's not how we see what rights are. We see them as generally it's a social contract that's explicit of society dictating what you can versus can't do. So like you can't, you don't have
the rape.
Like you don't have a right to murder in the U.S. because the society dictated that is illegal to murder.
Yeah, and the thing with the murder thing is that the idea with the social contract is if you want to live in U.S. society, you will not commit murder, and if you commit murder, we will remove you from American society by putting you in jail or executing you or whatever, which I'm fine with. I don't want people murdering, so I think that is a fair right to flush down the toilet. And
but
I
that's
freely
not
give
a
it
right
up.
then.
I don't go out and murder.
But that's not a right then. That's the idea with rights.
Well,
They're
I'm not
privileges.
exercising. But,
Well, they're privileges.
Well, no, but wait, hold on. Most people freely don't exercise their right to murder, and they don't.
But
They don't. They aren't attacked by the greater whole.
It's not a right though, because if it's not dictated in your society that it's okay to do something, then it's classified. Then it's not classified as a right. It's rights and privileges are synonyms, as we talked about earlier.
But synonyms don't mean the same thing.
But they're in a sense interchangeable in a lot of aspects, and the way that we classify as rights is a synonym that is interchangeable with privilege. The idea of a privilege, like your privilege of speech, your privilege of movement, privilege of gun ownership. These are all simply just privileges.
But I just don't. I don't agree. Like rights and privileges are not the same thing. Like they just aren't.
Well, that's if you want to go to dictionary definitions and stuff, that's the definition of it's in
We've been over this. I don't care what the dictionary says about that. Like in practical terms, rights and privileges are different.
Well, they're not though.
Like real terms.
Well, they're not.
They are.
They're not.
They are different.
Just like how you don't have a right to speech in France or Germany in terms of specific kinds of speech.
You do.
Specific kinds of speech.
You do. Well, no, you do until the government comes and arrests you, which they have to do. But
they don't have to.
They have to do it.
No, it's a right.
Okay, wait, Sonic.
Yeah.
So let's change this to Germany because it's a lot easier to do it.
Yeah.
So neo-Nazi propaganda illegal in Germany, right?
Sure. Yeah.
What if every single German, including the police, went out and started sig heiling and saying Nazi propaganda?
Well, then
do they have a right to do it?
If it all happened instantly, probably so, because it is part of the social contract at that point that it is okay.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, but you were arguing from a legalistic standpoint.
Sure.
Also, like there are laws.
The law would change. The law would probably change instantly at that case, right? If everyone agreed, then the law would instantly change.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. The problem is, though, is that laws tend actually not to get changed, and the problem is that we tack laws on and tack laws on and tack laws on, and then we get to the situation that the U.S. is in right now, where our federal government literally has like 10,000 laws.
Well, that's the thing.
Like the code book.
Well,
the code books are like 43 volumes.
Well, that's your problem with judicial review, right? That the law changes.
No, that's not judicial review. That's the legislature also being really bad at not knowing what. That's a different problem. It's a different problem altogether, because the problem is that
the law's changing. The federal law is changing too.
Wait. What happens? The reason why we have like 10,000 laws is because a new legislature will come in. They'll pass laws, and then over time that legislature will be replaced by a new legislature, and they'll pass laws, and they won't repeal anything the old legislature passed, because there's kind of this idea. Have you guys heard of Chesterton's fence?
No.
Sounds familiar.
McGuire. Okay, Chesterton's fence it's like it's basically the basis of conservative, or it's like the highest conservative ideal, which is the preservation of tradition. And the idea is, if you go out somewhere and you encounter a fence, you ought not tear it down before you figure out why the fence is there, which is all good and all, but the problem is that most people don't try to figure out why the fence is there, so they just leave it there. And maybe the fence is not good, and this is the problem with a lot of laws, is that there are lots of laws on the books that are passed and they are never amended or struck down. Like in Florida, for literal decades, there was that silly law that like women couldn't skydive on Sundays and things like that. It was recently overturned,
Yeah.
but it was only overturned because it was like the chief example of like ridiculous laws that the US had passed and things like that. So like legislatures are, I mean, I was saying earlier, oh, legislatures should, be the ones that define laws, but at the same time, legislatures on their own are really terrible at defining laws because they never get rid of old laws. And I kind of think the only way to fix that is to have a sunset on laws, and legislatures have to contend with whether or not a law is good or not by voting on it every so often.
Okay.
Interesting.
I know we went down a massive rabbit hole from rights and stuff, but like I am of the personal belief that people are really, really, really garbage at running themselves, and even the best system, the US system, is mediocre at best.
Okay.
And I love our system. I think our system is great.
Yeah. Well, there's certain things that you also don't like about it too. Yeah. A lot of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just described I described how judicial review is terrible and how legislatures are really bad at doing the one thing they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So,
But no, that's,
I mean,
well, getting back to rights, just because you can do it doesn't necessarily mean it is a right. So, I mean, that's
then
just
what
it
is that? What is that can thing then? What is that?
the can thing.
What do you call that?
What? Huh?
Yeah, what you can do. So
Oh,
the
what I can
action.
do.
What do you call that action?
It's just
What do
simply
you
an
call
action. It's an action. It's just
Just an action.
it's just an action. Yeah.
Okay, we should change the Bill of Rights to the Bill of Actions. I'm gonna win this discussion one way or another. I don't care.
No, no, it's just because you have the ability to do something doesn't necessarily make it a right. It's rights are simply just privileges within a given society. I mean, that's
It's like your opinion, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're gonna keep butting heads on this because, like, in the end, as with abortion, this is just a faith-based argument. In the end,
it doesn't even matter.
I mean, it does, but like, I mean, listen, like, we're seriously, we're not just splitting hairs. We're like
Yeah.
splitting a hair, splitting a hair, splitting a hair.
Literally just like ripping
And-
out
or
the
we're
fucking
splitting-
from the follicle.
Yeah, well, and we're splitting like the follicle like 500 million times. Like,
Yeah.
most people understand how rights work practically.
Yeah.
So,
McGuire, what you
like,
got?
I listen. Well, just my last thing. I mean, listen, like, practically, I do agree with you practically that if Teguberment wants to take away my right to own guns, like, there's more of Teguberment than there is of me. So they will eventually enforce that will upon me, either by taking my guns away because I willingly gave them up, or they killed me. But
Okay. Well, I mean, also owning something isn't necessarily a right either, right? Because owning something isn't an action. It's just your mental idea that this is mine. So
I guess until somebody tries to take it from me, in which I'll frickin' shoot them in the face.
Yeah, because you have
I'm
this.
willing to violently defend it.
Yeah, because you have this mental idea that it is your property, but ownership isn't an action. It's just a mental idea.
If I have a rock and I'm willing to kill for that rock, and nobody else is willing to kill for that rock, whose rock is it?
Societies, because Georgism.
Oh boy.
But it's not land, so it's not taxed.
Yeah, but you know, it is a resource though. Rocks are resources.
Wait,
They're natural resources.
How big of a rock? How big of a rock is a pebble land? Does that count?
Grains of
What's a
sand.
pebble?
Grains of sand.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
as the documentary film Shawshank Redemption showed me, pebbles have a lot of meaning if you find them just creeping up. Very important things.
All right.
you cannot own any. You cannot own anything. You can only own individual atoms.
You'll own nothing and be happy.
Okay,
Yeah.
I disagree.
Yes, comrade.
All right. What you got, McGuire? You got anything to input on all this shit?
Nope. Just enjoying the banter.
Just enjoying the banter.
Yep. Learning more about the fine differences between rights and privileges and actions and land, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, Georgism is a completely different discussion, and it's a little bit. It's so like Georgism is to Sonic like Rawls is to me, basically. Like I don't know. It's equally
Weird
religious.
fetish.
Yeah, I'll suck Henry George's dick any day. Just like he'll suck Rawls' dick any day.
I'm not. No, I wouldn't. No. Well, one Rawls is dead, so that would
George.
be weird.
So is George. I'll also do it.
Yeah, but I don't.
George,
but
Daddy
I don't know if
George.
you're into necrophilia. But
I'm not. Daddy George
No,
though. Daddy
but-
George.
Oh
But-
boy.
yeah, Georgism is a different discussion.
We can get into that fucking Wednesday. Yeah, because we already
No,
talked.
we have to go find. We have to find a woman to give her opinion because
True, of
men
abortion.
can't give an opinion on abortion.
True.
And Maddie won't care about Georgism. She'll get really bored with that.
True. We'll talk about socialism. That's her favorite.
Oh boy.
No.
Socialism's always a talk. I'll have to brush up on my Marx. You know, funny story actually. The other
Marx-
day.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, the other day. Okay, this woman I know texted me. It was the International Women's Day. I don't remember when that was because I do not give a fuck. But she texted me that I should Venmo her in response to the wage gap. And it was hilarious. She was being half legitimate, I think. So I'm like, okay, I'll hit her with a Marx quote about how a true worker wants to revolutionize the system rather than use these little Venmos and whatnot to try and sustain it, and how she's really a class trader, and she didn't like that at all. It was a funny conversation, back and forth about. Oh, go ahead,
McGuire. So what you're saying is for International Women's Day, which was like last week, you only gave 70 cents on the dollar of your attention to it.
Yeah, something like that. 77 cents. You gotta be real about it, okay? Come on. That 7
Jesus.
cents matters. That's the difference between you know.
Damn.
I don't know. It's a difference between something. I don't know. I'm not a woman. I don't pinch pennies like that.
Yeah.
I get paid what I'm worth, but
Yeah, and according to one of our mutual friends, women shouldn't have rights. So
I wouldn't call him a friend.
Yeah, mutual people we piss off on Discord.
yeah,
Student to never talk to again. They're
Probably
right
not.
on the cusp.
yeah. I'm ready to leave as soon as they kick y'all. Yeah. And I've been there for
I'm
I've been there
biting
for
at the bit.
months. I've been there for fucking ever.
I don't care about Discord drama. Who cares? Anyways,
Yeah.
solve them solved. But yeah,
Absolutely.
we should get Maddie on to voice her 70 cents on the dollar opinion on abortion.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Then we
She's
should
been-
talk over her and explain that she's being emotional.
It's funny. She's actually really not. She's actually very clear-headed and things like that. One time we were driving through the pass when it was snowy and my truck
Mhm.
spun out and she like didn't flinch at all.
Oh, there you
So
go.
normally most women and meanwhile the last time I drove through the pass there was a girl that I was driving with and she's like, you're going too fast, and I was literally going like maybe 30 miles an hour through these corners.
Yeah.
It was a little snowy and she's like, I think we're gonna die, and I'm like, we're fine, we're not gonna die.
Then
So
you just gotta full send it.
Yeah.
meanwhile I'm literally spinning out at like 80 miles an hour in the pass and Maddie was just like, whoa, that was a trip.
Whoa, man.
Always a hoot.
A hoot and a holler.
He does smoke a lot of weed, but that's a different story.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, that's
we'll
okay.
get our discussion. We'll get her topics and stuff next time too.
All right.
Yeah.
Do we want to have like a little recap? Maybe do book reviews or like recommendations?
All of the above. So, fetuses don't have rights. You don't have rights.
Only if they're women.
Yeah.
Only if they're women.
No, not even women. No one has rights. Your rights can be taken away from you. Defend them with guns if you need to. And fetuses aren't people.
Almost here in Alabama.
I disavow. Yeah, I disavow all of this.
Up to 20. Well, even defending rights with guns. Damn. Okay. Okay.
That's out of character.
Everything. I'm just kidding.
I think he's
no.
having a stroke.
I think we ought to arm fetuses with machine guns and nuclear weapons.
True. True. All right.
Alrighty.
McGuire.
Book reviews?
No, McGuire's got fucking one last thing to say.
Oh.
You fucking bitch.
Do I?
Yeah, fucking say anything. Recap your shit.
No, it's the recap. Okay, he did his recap. I did my recap of giving nukes to fetuses. What's your recap?
Yeah.
Gotcha, I follow.
Yeah.
I don't know. Judges that openly cite the Bible after saying that they adhere to the letter of the law should be fucking executed. Traitors.
Be nuked.
Yeah. Restart nuclear testing on the Alabama Supreme Court building.
All right.
Problem solved.
All right, Delta, what's your book review? What book?
Well, I did bring up Rousseau earlier, and he has so many good books, but I brought up The Social Contract was brought up, and Rousseau's The Social Contract is really good. And I used to not. I'm gonna preface this. When I was an edgy teenager, I read Hobbes, I read Locke, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm just like the founding fathers. I'm so based and red pilled. And then I heard about Rousseau, and he was one of those philosophers that like he was described to me in this really terrible way, and I was like, oh, he's just a hippie communist Frenchman. Who cares about that man? Well, I think he was from Switzerland, but he spoke French. Who cares about that man? And then I read it, and I was like, oh my god, I was so wrong about this guy. This guy is like even more based and red pilled than like Thomas Jefferson getting TRT and riding a velociraptor. So read Rousseau's The Social Contract. It is the most base thing you'll ever read ever.
And in regards to our first discussion, you should read The Handmaid's Tale.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know, full disclosure on that one. In high school, I had to do a book report on that, and I just watched the TV show. It kind of fucking sucked. Not gonna lie.
And of course, just like last time, read the Communist Manifesto.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Gotta get the Marx plug in there. Yeah.
Yeah, just like last time. Yeah. Always gotta recommend the Communist Manifesto. And Das Kapital.
Yeah. Know thy enemy.
Das Kapital. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Das Kapital.
All right, Mr. McGuire.
Shit. I think I mentioned this somewhere at some point in the past. Orwell's Homage to Catalonia. One of the two.
That one's good.
Catalonia.
Yep. Yeah. Good read right there. Probably not of much historical value, I guess. I mean, unless you want to find out that the Spanish people are lazy. They are, as stereotypes are true. But it's interesting insight into what an active revolution by a bunch of lazy people who can't follow through on shit looks like. And hearing Orwell's disappointment is interesting too.
Okay.
But definitely worth a read.
Okay.
Alrighty.
All right. Last words. Anyone?
Ligma balls.
Ligma balls. All right. Got him.
No more dabs.
No.
Okay. There we go. He's sneaking one in.
Okay.
Okay. And close. He's edging us.
And off.